In today's video, we're going to talk about beyond burnout, non-negotiable self-care skills for the exhausted NT partner, and also why the NT partner sometimes confuses self-abandonment with love. So if you're watching this, chances are you're not just tired, you're emotionally tired. Not the I need a nap kind of tired, but the kind of tired that lives in your chest, the kind that doesn't go away after rest, the kind that comes from constantly monitoring, adjusting, explaining, anticipating, and holding everything together. And here's the part I want to say clearly, early, and without apology. Your exhaustion makes sense. But today we're not here to analyze your ASD spouse. We're not here to fix communication. We're not here to talk about empathy gaps or relationship dynamics. Today is about you, the NT spouse. Because if you're burned out, nothing else works. This video is about 3 non-negotiable self-care skills. Not spa day self-care, but survival level self-care for the NT partner who has been carrying too much for too long. Now let's talk about reframing self-care and why this is not optional. Many NT partners resist self-care because it feels selfish. They might think, well, if I focus on myself, I'm abandoning the relationship. Or if I stop compensating, everything will fall apart. Or I don't have the luxury of taking care of myself. But here's the truth that burnout eventually teaches, often the hard way. You can't regulate 2 nervous systems indefinitely. Your body already knows this. That chronic tightness, that irritability you don't recognize in yourself, that emotional numbness or quiet resentment. Self-care is not a reward for surviving. It's a boundary against collapse. So let's talk about the first skill. Skill number 1, boundary clarity, not boundary enforcement. When most people hear boundaries, they think of rules for other people. But exhausted NT partners don't struggle with boundary enforcement. They struggle with boundary clarity. You may not be clear on what you can give versus what you are giving, where responsibility ends and self-betrayal begins, what you tolerate because you're compassionate versus what you tolerate because you're afraid. Boundary clarity starts internally. So here are 3 grounding questions to ask yourself regularly. What am I responsible for and what am I managing out of fear? Responsibility is clean. Fear-based management is exhausting. What happens in my body when I say yes? Tight chest, shallow breathing, a sinking feeling. That's data. What am I afraid will happen if I stop compensating? This fear, not reality, often keeps you trapped. A boundary doesn't require an argument. It requires self-permission. And here's the reframe. A boundary is not something you do to someone else. It's something you stop doing to yourself. Now, before we move on, let's take a moment. Unclench your jaw, drop your shoulders, exhale longer than you inhale. You don't need to fix anything right now, just notice your body. Skill number 2, nervous system self-regulation without co-regulating your ASD spouse. Many NT partners become accidental emotional regulators. You scan tone, you anticipate reactions, you soften yourself preemptively, you absorb dysregulation to keep peace, and over time, your nervous system never gets to stand down. Now here's the hard truth. If your calm depends on someone else's state, you're never truly calm. Self-regulation means learning to settle your system without waiting for external safety. And here are 3 practices that actually work when you're depleted. Orient to yourself, not the room. Instead of asking, is everything okay? Ask, am I okay in my body right now? Put a hand on your chest or abdomen. Feel pressure, warmth, contact. This tells your nervous system, I'm fine. Create micro separations. You don't need the distance forever, just moments where your system is not on alert. This might mean taking a walk without explaining yourself, closing a door without guilt, pausing a conversation instead of pushing through. Regulation requires interruption. Let silence do the work. You don't have to fill space to keep things from escalating. Silence is not abandonment, it's stabilization. Your nervous system needs proof that nothing bad happens when you stop managing. Now, if your body feels emotional right now, that's okay. This work touches old survival patterns. Slow breath in, long breath out. You're not doing this wrong, okay? Skill number 3, external validation. rebuilding identity outside the relationship. This is the one most NT partners underestimate and suffer without. When you live in a relationship where emotional reciprocity is limited or inconsistent, you may unconsciously shrink your world. You stop sharing. You stop being witnessed. You stop expecting validation. And over time, your sense of self becomes tied to how well things are going, whether there's conflict, and whether your partner is regulated. That's not sustainable. You need mirrors outside the relationship, not to vent endlessly, not to vilify your ASD spouse, but to be seen. External validation might look like a therapist who understands relational trauma, a friend who reflects your reality without minimizing, a community where you don't have to explain yourself. And here's the key mindset shift. Validation is not disloyalty. It's oxygen. You're allowed to have an inner life that does not orbit around someone else's needs. Now let's talk about integration. What changes when you tend to yourself first? When you practice the 3 skills that I mentioned earlier consistently, something subtle but very powerful happens. You stop over-explaining. You stop chasing resolution. You stop measuring your worth by emotional outcomes, not because you stopped caring, but because you stopped disappearing. And from that place, clarity emerges. Not urgency, not panic, just grounded choice. Now, if no one has told you this lately, let me say it very plainly. You are not weak for being exhausted. You're tired because you have been strong for too long without support. This isn't about giving up on your relationship. It's about coming back to yourself. And that, no matter what happens next, is never a mistake. Now let's talk about why NT partners confuse self-abandonment with love. Let me start with a question you might not have words for yet. At what point did love start costing you pieces of yourself? Not all at once, not dramatically, but slowly, quietly, almost imperceptibly. You didn't decide to abandon yourself. You adapted, you accommodated, you learned to bend, and somewhere along the way, sacrifice began to feel like love. So in this next section of the video, we're going to talk about why NT partners so often confuse self-abandonment with love, and why that confusion leads to exhaustion, resentment, and emotional erosion. This isn't about blaming you. It's about helping you see something clearly so you can stop paying a price you were never meant to pay. Now here's a crucial reframe. Self-abandonment doesn't look like neglect. It looks like being understanding when you're actually hurt, being patient when you're depleted, being flexible when you're disappearing. It feels noble. It feels mature. It feels loving. And that's exactly why it's so dangerous. Because self-abandonment masquerades as a virtue. Let's talk about how this pattern forms. Most NT partners don't come into relationships planning to overgive, but many of you share certain traits. High empathy, emotional attunement, a strong capacity for responsibility, a tendency to self-reflect before blaming. Those are strengths, but in certain dynamics, strengths become survival strategies. You learn that, well, if I stay calm, things don't escalate. Or if I don't need much, it's easier. Or if I explain myself better, we'll connect. So you soften, you adjust, you make yourself smaller, not because you lack worth, but because you're trying to preserve connection. And slowly the equation forms. Love means adapting more. Love means asking for less. Love means not making things harder. That's not love. That's emotional self-abandonment. Now let's take a gentle pause here. If this is landing heavily, let's pause for a moment, breathe. You didn't do this work because you were weak. You did it because connection really matters to you. Now let's talk about why self-abandonment feels safer than authenticity. Here's something many NT partners don't realize. Self-abandonment often feels safer than self-expression. Why? Because self-expression risks conflict, misunderstanding, emotional rupture, and being seen as too much. But self-abandonment promises stability, predictability, fewer disruptions, and less emotional labor in the moment. So your nervous system learns, suppressing myself keeps things calm. But calm is not the same as safe. Over time, this creates a quiet internal split. The part of you that adapts and the part of you that aches. And that ache doesn't disappear, it waits. Now let's talk about the hidden cost of confusing love with self-loss. When love requires ongoing self-abandonment, several things happen. You stop trusting your own needs. You minimize your emotional reality. You feel guilty for wanting emotional reciprocity, and you start doubting whether you're asking too much. Eventually, exhaustion sets in, not because you stopped loving, but because you stopped being loved back in a way your nervous system can register. And here's the truth that's hard to hear, but very necessary. Love that requires you to disappear is not sustainable, no matter how compassionate you are. Now let's talk about the turning point, redefining love internally. This shift doesn't start by changing the relationship. It starts by changing your internal definition of love. Instead of love means accommodating, love means enduring, love means understanding without being understood, try this reframe instead. Love includes me. Love does not require self-betrayal. It does not punish authenticity. It does not demand silence in exchange for peace. This doesn't mean ultimatums. It doesn't mean blame. It means self-alignment. And alignment is quiet but powerful. Now let's talk about what it looks like to stop abandoning yourself. Stopping self-abandonment doesn't mean becoming cold or rigid. It often looks like pausing instead of explaining, saying, I'm not available for this right now, letting disappointment exist without fixing it, choosing rest without justification. At first, this feels very uncomfortable because your nervous system is used to earning connection through self-sacrifice. But discomfort is not danger. It's withdrawal from an old pattern. Now, here's the truth that most NT partners need to hear. You were never meant to prove your love by hurting yourself. You are meant to be in a relationship, not erased by it. Now, if this video stirred something in you, sit with it gently. Awareness is not a demand for action. It's an invitation to honesty. And honesty with yourself is where healing actually begins. Now, if you want to continue this conversation, stay connected. You don't have to figure this out alone. And remember, love should feel like presence, not disappearance. If you want to go deeper, I have more information in the description and also pinned in the comments. Please subscribe, like, share this with someone who may be suffering in this way. And I would be very interested in hearing your comments. I read and respond to all of them, and I'll see you in the next video. Would you like to schedule a paid private coaching session? This will be in the form of a face-to-face Zoom call. Underneath any of my videos, you'll see this Calendly link. If you click on that link, it'll open up my calendar. You can pick the available days and times that works for your schedule. You'll get a follow-up email immediately after purchasing a session that will have the Zoom link that coincides with the day and time that you picked. I will get an email too that you scheduled a session, and I will be available on that exact day and time, and we will talk. I look forward to working with you.